We'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a
Oh,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much. Right, thanks guys. Well, I'm sure we've all in the past carried little snippets of code and techniques of code around with us as we move from one project to another. So I thought I'd tell you about a little code reuse dream/nightmare that began for me in 2004 and from which I have not yet quite awoken. So in 2004, a business analyst that had known me from a previous life got in touch with me and said, would you like to come along and visit us at the Independent Transport Safety and Reliability Regulator, which was a typically bureaucratic New South Wales government department, and it's all about transport safety regulation. And they said, she said, it's a greenfield project, it's a new start, it's an enterprise level app. Would you like to come and tell us how you would do this? The good news is there's a budget of $1 million, that's about £500,000, and there's a year, 12 months available to do the project. The bad news is 11 months has already been used up. And a bunch of data analysts have come and done an exhaustive data analysis project. They've left us with an ER diagram and cleared off with $1 million. So it kind of got scarier and scarier as it went along. They said, look, there's a little bit of money left, a little bit of time left. How would you do it? And what's more, by the way, that there's members of the board that are convinced that this is a project that would take no less than $25 million to build, because that's what happens in these big government departments. And it was a really fascinating situation to be in. So I said, what do you do in these situations? I said, yes. I'll do it. So they said, all right, how would you do it? Would you do it in Java or .NET? And I was really enjoying Perl code at the time, but like 2004, I was already doing web apps in Perl, but using CGI, the CGI library and that sort of thing. I really, really wanted to try and recommend, like, I want to do this in Perl and so on, but I felt that Perl, at that point, it didn't have the cred to present this with credibility at sort of the management board level, say this is my recommendation. And I was fully expected to sort of come up with one of them. So I sort of decided, well, am I going to be professional and say, yeah, we'll do this in Java and all that sort of stuff, or will I be honest? And, I really love to have a go at this. How am I going to even get this past proposal level? Now, it's incredible. At about the same time, I became aware of Maple. And I don't know how much it had preceded this little consulting assignment. I think it had only just come out, but I had a good look at it, and I was quite enthusiastic because I thought this actually, even though it's a very, very small package, and those of you that have seen it, would probably see it, there's some merit as being, if you like, a granddaddy of the major Perl web frameworks that we've got today. I was actually really impressed by some of the things that are in it. It showed how to use class DBI. That was the ORM at the time. And I kind of like class DBI and still do for reasons for which there's no time now to go into. But class DBI and class DBI loader and template toolkit obviously for the screen rendering. And this was very much in line with the approach and techniques that I had used in previous lives, using technologies that are long since dead and buried in years gone by. But the fundamental concepts of how you get a relational database system and just explode it into a web app, people are sort of doing that all the time with tools all the time, but I think the really important thing and the fascinating challenge is how do you do that in a way that will scale and in a way that will allow you to start customizing and tweaking this automatically generated stuff and really turn it into an enterprise app. These are essentially the ideas behind it. I don't think there's time to talk about them in great philosophical terms, but essentially in that very, very small initial Maypole package, relationships driving website navigation, stringify rules, the importance of stringify rules, writing a stringify for every object in your object model, and then using those stringifications in strategic places in the app that you're generating, how we choose our templates and how we override our templates, the story about how it all comes together. That was enough to make me propose, I said, went to the board and I said, right, well, there's this very mature, very well established, very highly regarded package called Maypole, and yes, we can do all this with something called Maypole. I remember it very well. It was, I was only sticking my neck out. I mean, it was only my career at stake, so we thought, let's go for it. So we recruited just one other programmer, and we had some business analysts on the job. And it just all came together, in short, it came together very, very nicely. It was a great app, like hundreds of tables. And like every app I've ever seen, the database design was evolving and morphing as the app went along. You know, despite the $1 million data model, you're always changing tables and adding columns and all that sort of stuff. So that led to something which, when I look back on it, I think it was an important principle that we held in that app and we maintained in a bunch of apps following that. This principle that I like to just try and achieve, if you're in one of these database-driven web application projects, a very nice concept that these days we like to call continuous delivery, and so one of the things in continuous delivery is if somebody changes the database, they've added a table, they've added some columns, maybe they've changed some columns or whatever, they ought to be able to do that. There may be DBAs separate to your project, there may be ETL people, there's all sorts of other stuff going on. You know, you don't own the world, you don't own that database world, but we're changing the database over there. It should be possible to just restart, in those days Apache, restart Apache, Nginx, whatever, and I expect the web app that we've generated, customised, tweaked, whatever, I expect it to up and run, barring, of course, any mentions of the column that just got dropped, obviously. So I guess I don't expect that much of it. But if we're talking about adding or morphing the database to a very high degree, that is your goal, and you can think of ways to achieve that, and my argument is that if you do get that right, then you can get a very, very small team using Perl libraries to build big enterprise-level web apps. So the project managers were swinging from the chandeliers. They loved it. They couldn't believe that we could build such a big project so quickly with all the customisations and everything. I've been asked to a medical health case management department with very grave subject matter. It's about people who get dust-related diseases in their lungs and the case management issues to do with that. Dust Diseases Board, another government department. And basically they said that was a good party trick over at ITSA, can you do that again? So we went over there. By now Catalyst had appeared on the scene, and we've been watching that with great interest. So we rewrote the same concepts using Catalyst, kept template toolkit, a package called Catalyst Enzyme, which I think is long maintained, but it provided some very, very handy templates that I thought were very, very good. Put them all together at the DDB, and then they said, well, where's the database? It's SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server. These are things over which you sometimes have very little control. So how are we going to do authentication? It's Microsoft Active Directory. So you've sort of been brought into a big government department, and again, you can't change these things. But this scary thing actually turned into a plus because this is not so much about Perl anymore, but about some fantastic open source projects, free TDS and Sandra, obviously. Getting these into the project and linking these up with our Catalyst app, we were able to set up really sophisticated group-level authorization schemes and single sign-on with Internet Explorer, and we had it absolutely humming against, Microsoft SQL Server, which turns out to actually be a pretty good relational database engine. It's actually not too bad at all. It's very good. And so I had all my little Unixy tools operating directly against that, and really it was super fast. So great packages there. And that was a very successful project. So the original project manager for ITSA, by then he was working in a big project at a very, very large crime enforcement organisation in New South Wales that I'm not allowed to mention. So I went there, it's called police, and it was just like the same story again. This time the database was Infinix, By then, the pattern had emerged. You've got to rewrite the loader of your ORM. The reason being, as we were just chatting a second ago, I strongly believe in getting these things as dynamic and seamless as possible. There's performance improvements you need to do to the loader. Every loader that anybody's ever written for every ORM starts by just analysing one table at a time. You can speed that up, especially as your database scales to hundreds of tables. Just do one query against the catalogue, get all the catalogue information, like tables and columns, and then review it one table at a time. And now you're working on a big Perl hash instead of hundreds of database queries, for example. Okay, so we morphed and hacked at this code. It was evil and it was very non-CPAN culture, I must confess. But we certainly, once again, this was in the data warehouse department of police, we put together some big, really big apps that again, it used all the authentication and authorization and stuff by reading Active Directory, which was very successful. So over the years, these are projects that all used what me and my colleagues in Sydney we just started calling it the tables framework, for want of a better name. A variety of databases, moved out of government departments and as I moved into finance apps, real-time finance, customer management, school zone safety was back in a government app, and it was actually real-time device management. But the database behind it was the same story all again. So the message here is an extraordinary variety of business application domains and a massively different look and feel across all of these applications. But at the core of them was this continuous integration principle of just the tables framework, as we call it. Add there from a mate of mine who asked me if he could just pitch all the code and use it for his car club app, ourcarclub.info. If any of you are into motor cars and members of car clubs, that's a site using the tables framework written on Catalyst and MySQL, which lets car club administrators manage their clubs. If you haven't played with it, it's again, the only message I want to come across is that these are complex apps written by very small teams. And I think that's what people might say when they say disruptive. So roll forward to this year, and my colleagues have always been on it and saying, well, when are you going to give something back to the world and put it all in CPAN? So I'm trying to do that now. With the passing of time and looking at this stuff, I'm a very strong advocate of Majorlicious. That's my choice on which web framework to use. So the templating becomes Major Template, which is another way of saying you get to do your templating in Perl. And of course, it's overwhelmingly the case that you go to DBX class now, because of, again, as we were mentioning a moment ago, some fantastic work these guys have done. I can see it all there on CPAN, of reverse engineering and managing every goddamn data management mechanism known to man. They've done very well. So, okay, out of time. That's about it. Tables framework is now on CPAN. It's called Majorlicious Plugin Tables. There's a utility there that lets you put up a day one, or ground zero, web app by just giving it a DBI string. But that's just a party trick. The real point is to be able to modify, enhance and grow that app. So this 0.1 release is sort of like a baby version of it yet. But I'm working on it. I'm using a site, a pretend site called optalfutures.com. You can go to it now and you can look up the winners and losers on the London Stock Exchange yesterday and do all sorts of queries against the London Stock Exchange, all using freely available data. So I'm using that site to research a whole bunch of other non-Perl stuff like AWS and Google Single Sign-In and things like that. But I am using Majorlicious plugin tables, and that's 1 week old now, DBX class schema loader dynamic, where I'm starting to explore with my take on, as we were just chatting there, about things that we might be able to do with DBX class schema loader. Yeah, thanks very much. That's that.
We've got time for one quick question, if anyone has anything. Thank you.